Our
somebody
mutual
else.
friend Lee is on this morning. Lee,
Hey,
why don't you
Lee.
unmute yourself and give us a little background on
Hi,
how you
John.
and John came to know one another.
Once upon a time, many years ago, there was this thing that started to become popularized called the internet. And it was about 1994. I was one of the considered early pioneers. So we can call it Internet 0.8. And John was becoming one of the leading authority figures advising major corporations around the world as the first partner of McKinsey and Company new internet department. And we met through that relationship, and he's been a guiding light both professionally and spiritually ever since.
Oh,
Lovely. Now, Lee, I'm curious. Yes, I knew John's bio as that's quite a way to be known as the guy who was the first one at McKinsey to start this practice for following e-commerce. But remind me, what were you doing at the time that you and he became entwined at that time?
I was employee number one of a company called First Virtual, which, depending upon who you ask and which system, I think the Smithsonian, the Financial Times would say that it created the first, if not one of the first, financial transactions on the internet with a payment system before I guess just about the time that Mosaic had come out. So we launched officially on the front page of the New York Times business section in 1994, October 11th, 1994, if my recollection is correct.
How big did First Virtual become before it became part of something else that I may have heard of?
It was an interesting journey. All of the patents were eventually acquired by PayPal, or actually by eBay, as part of their PayPal franchise that they were building. And SoftBank came in as a partner after our IPO.
Okay. And you went IPO when?
96, December 13th, 96, if I recall correctly.
And
the Series A was Sybase. The Series B was First USA Banks Merchant Services. The Series C was GE Capital, and the Series D was First Data Corporation. So it was a real deal. We IPO'd, and then SoftBank came in, and it was in the days where we needed releases to be part of trials with MasterCard and Visa in order to accept credit cards over the internet. Like I said, Internet 0.8.
Very, very interesting. And when was First Virtual as an entity no more?
I left the board in 98 when the market cap hit $1 billion. And although there was a fair amount of dilution from day one. And
so you didn't get to keep all $1 billion yourself?
Not all of it, no.
Not all of it. Okay.
A very small piece. And anyway, but John and I kind of walked those early internet years together and John could elaborate on it a little bit more, because we were out in front, and we were taking the bows and arrows, or the arrows, as they say.
Well, again, thank you for this introduction today and this rich opportunity for my audience to learn from this man personally.
And while we're on, I'll just finish by saying thank you, John, for your guidance and friendship.
No, it's been a great relationship for sure.
Thank you. Thank you.
That was very warming. Thank you both. I enjoyed that. John, I know you as someone who focuses on emerging business opportunities, and clearly this internet, that's what you called it, internet, was an emerging business opportunity back in the early 90s. What do you see as emerging opportunities today, and how can my audience of medical device manufacturers and the folks that serve that community begin to think about and leverage some of those emerging trends that you see? Thank you, Lee.
I'm by nature an optimist, and I believe there are a lot of opportunities at any point in time. one of the ways I have of describing the big shift, the long-term forces that are reshaping the global economy, is that they are creating exponentially expanding opportunity. That we can create far more value with far less resource, far more quickly than would have ever been imaginable a few decades ago. So it's a broad-based set of opportunities in many different markets and industries. I think that just to zero in on one opportunity that I think is interesting, it's actually flipping what can be a challenge into an opportunity. One of the challenges that I believe is playing out in the global economy is that customers are becoming more and more powerful. They're more demanding. They want products and services that are tailored to their unique individual needs, and they want it cheaply. They don't want to pay a lot of money for it. So they're becoming more demanding and more powerful in terms of insisting on those demands. I think the opportunity that it creates is, on the other side, there are more and more options that are available for customers. And so an opportunity is to become what I call the trusted advisor to a customer, someone who gets to know them extremely well and can be trusted to connect them to the best products and services wherever they are, whoever's providing them. The challenge is that I think for most traditional companies, they all want to be trusted advisor. Mm-hmm. But the interesting thing is every time the customer has a need, they recommend their own product or service.
Right.
Whoa, really? Yeah. I'm going to trust you? Excuse me.
Consistent with what I advise my clients, many of whom serve the industry. Be glad to represent your competitor's product if, in fact, it measures better on a metric that's interesting to the person with whom you're consulting. And I would say that it's difficult for an enterprise to be a trusted advisor, but that guy or gal who works there, who knows the industry better than anyone that I know, who can objectively say, I'll tell you what, you really should go with the other one. That person is the thought leader. And I think a challenge now is, how do you get that message out to broad masses, given the splintering of social media and other ways of getting the message out? I have a whole list, and I know you know this better than anyone, of ways to get your message out. But boy, it's tough for someone who's just starting now, isn't it?
No, it is. But I actually wrote a book on this. I called it The Power of Pull, which is that I think that increasingly the key to success in addressing these opportunities is, rather than trying to push the message out through advertising or marketing to get the person to pay attention to you, no, it's find some initial contacts, customers that you can serve in this way, and get the word of mouth to spread so that people are actually seeking you out. They're not, just waiting for the message to come to them. They're trying to find you because they heard that you provided so much service and value to this other person. I got to find this company. And so I think that's increasingly what's going to lead to success, is really finding ways to deliver that value in a way that prompts the people to start recommending you and urging others to find you.
I have to imagine that your path has crossed Seth Godin's at one time or another.
Oh, a few times, yeah.
I suspected as much, and I suspect there's a backstory there, which I won't probe, but I will say his permission marketing book had a major impact on me. It helped me get a job at 1-800-Flowers.com back in 1999. I had read the book before Jim or any of the McCanns, and I went in and I just mentioned a few of those things. They were like, wow, this guy really gets it. I read the book like a week before. Anyhow, what Seth said not terribly long ago, maybe 5 years ago, and I've certainly bought into, is content marketing is the only marketing left. Basically, you can shut off everything else, and now people search for what they want, and they will consume only what they're searching for. So either you're that answer or you're not there. Do you agree?
No, I think, again, it goes to this notion of customers becoming more demanding and more powerful, and they want information that's relevant and valuable to them, and they'll search for it, but they're not going to be just listening to or looking at ads. And there's so many ads now that you get consumed by it. And I think it's got to be real search that that customers are making. And if you can provide information that's relevant and valuable to them, they'll start to pay more attention.
Today's topic is yours, the only sustainable edge. What is the only sustainable edge?
Well, again, I wrote a whole book on it, so I have to condense it into a short
Start
summary.
with chapter 2. The first chapter is just preface and introductory comments.
Yeah, exactly. Now, for me, this stems again from my research into what I call the big shift, the changes that are playing out in the global economy and society. And in that environment, I've come to believe that the only sustainable edge is learning faster at scale. And I think that the challenge is, I frame in the book, there are two different institutional models. The one that most traditional companies pursue today is what I call scalable efficiency, right? The key to success is to become more and more efficient at scale, just faster and cheaper, and keep growing because you're faster and cheaper.
Mm-hmm.
I believe the problem with that, number one, is that it's a diminishing returns proposition. The more efficient you become, the longer and harder you have to work to get that next increment of efficiency. So under the best of circumstances, it's diminishing returns. And then it's just, in a rapidly changing world, the approach to efficiency that companies have adopted is paradoxically becoming more and more inefficient. The way to get efficient in the traditional companies is to tightly specify every task that needs to be done, highly standardize those tasks so they're done in the same efficient way throughout the corporation, and then tightly integrate all those tasks, remove those inefficient buffers that separate tasks, tightly integrate. Okay, tightly specified, highly standardized, tightly integrated. What happens when an unexpected situation emerges? People are scrambling to figure out, what the hell do I do now? This is not in the manual. And based on some research, I looked at some large companies and found that roughly 60% of all the time of the workers was being spent on what became known as exception handling. There was an exception, something that they hadn't expected that wasn't in the manual. And again, very inefficiently scrambling to figure out, how do I address this? So efficiency becomes inefficient. On the flip side, I believe that in this rapidly changing world with lots of unexpected events that come up, the key to success is scalable learning. That's the only sustainable edge, learning faster at scale. But I hasten to add here, when I talk to executives about learning, they say, oh, training programs. Yeah, we have training programs. What training program at what stage in the career of the person? No, I am not talking about training programs. Training programs are all about sharing existing knowledge. The learning that's most valuable and necessary in a rapidly changing world is learning in the form of creating new knowledge that never existed before. And the only way you do that, it's not in a training room. You do that in the workplace through action together with others. And the question is, if you really accept that scalable learning is the only sustainable edge, what are the implications of that for everything you do in your company? I believe everything has to change from the ground up. If we take this seriously, it's a fundamentally different way of doing business, operating, organizing, everything.
I just picked up my phone to text a friend, and I have another one to text that they have to get on this call as soon as, if they can drop everything and join us. I have two friends on the call already that I'm going to bring on. One of them is Nick Anderson, and another is Paul D'Souza, both dear friends. And Nikki, I'm going to start with you. And I can never remember the name of the author that you brought to my attention. You know exactly where I'm going, right? Yeah, you're on mute. Nick is my go-to person for health economics, anything on reimbursement and the like. He's your guy. Nikki, who was that speaker you introduced me to?
Joseph Tainter.
John, do you know of Joseph Tainter's work?
I've heard the name, but I wouldn't say I know his work.
Nikki, would you?
Yeah, you caught me as I was typing a comment.
About that?
Like a derivative of that. We were on this, you and I were on the same wavelength, Joe. John, my concern is that, yes, the premise is that the customer is more demanding and asking for more and more tailored solutions to their problem, whether it's a medical device or it's a new t-shirt. You know, we Americans want more tailored, more acutely defined, you know, look no further than how we get our entertainment. You used to just turn on the TV and you got what you got.
Right.
Now Netflix and Amazon Prime and Disney Plus, and I get what I want exactly when I want it. The problem is Americans are getting poorer. This is not something I've heard, not even one time on CNBC or Bloomberg or any of them, but it's absolutely the truth. We produce nothing. We had a 1.08 trillion deficit last year, trade deficit. Americans consume, and produce nothing to the tune of $1 trillion of imports out of balance with our exports, which as an Austrian economist, I look at that and think, this is a nightmare. You know, we just hit $30 trillion in federal debt on the first day of this month, somewhere between January 31st and February 1st, $30 trillion in national debt. That Americans are quickly becoming the 40-year-old living in their mom and dad's basement, demanding more and more filet mignon cooked just to the temperature they want it. And mom and dad are continuing to feed this 40-year-old in the basement. Meanwhile, all we produce is Twitter and Facebook and the metaverse. And sooner or later, our trade partners, OUS, are going to say, look, America, you're taking advantage of your reserve currency status and you have abused it. Look at your M2. You know, look at your M2 money supply. Look at your $1 trillion annual trade deficit. The only thing keeping you guys alive is a 0% overnight Fed funds rate. You guys are on life support and ECMO. You consume, and you produce almost nothing of tangible value.
Nikki, I could listen to you all day, and I often have. You're going very economic, but the punchline was, we're all doomed as a population.
Yeah, that we're doom is I don't use that word. That we will take a substantial step back as United States citizens. And I won't go as far as to say the Western world or anything like that. I don't know about England and France and Germany. I don't know about Latin America. I'm only talking United States. That Americans can demand all we want, and we have for a generation, but we were a surplus trade nation until 30 years ago. Now we're a trade deficit nation. And the Joseph Tainter view, Joseph Tainter is not an economist, he's an anthropologist. And what Joe and I have been talking about lately are some of his views about the law of diminishing returns. That
exactly what you were saying, John.
What John said, you know, and that portion I completely agree with John, is that how many more ways can we find to entertain ourselves? What's the next big leap in Netflix and Amazon Prime? What's the next big, you know, we're consuming more and more and producing less and less.
The more energy we burn to figure out how to make a sonogram that much better, all of those resources, energy, human capital, electricity, was it worth it? And at what point do we just use too much? John, your thoughts? I know, well, I brought Nikki on. That was my own fault. I'm sorry.
It's great. It's great to hear. No, I'm a fellow Austrian economist, so I can definitely understand his perspective. I guess certainly there are issues in the short term with the way the governments and the spending is occurring. I don't think again, when I look at the big shift, I'm not looking at it just in the US. I'm looking at it globally. Customers are becoming more demanding around the world. It's not just the US, it's everywhere. And if we don't pay attention to that, and I think we do pay attention because the stress and fear is mounting among corporations, they see that they're what used to satisfy customers is no longer satisfying them. They're going to be in trouble. And the question is, what do they need to do in order to really address that? And I think we could have a short-term kind of turmoil in various economies, but I think the longer term trends are not going to go away. customers are going to remain more powerful over time. So what do we do about it? How do we learn faster and to provide more and more value to those customers? And that's, I think,
we
the
were
key.
hoping you had the answer.
I'm sorry?
I said, we were hoping you had the answer.
Well, I do. It's it's the notion of scalable learning and really exploring all the implications that has, and then recognizing that's a fundamental transformation of what we're doing today. And by the way, I'll just mention, I am very frustrated. Transformation is one of the most used words in business today. Every company I know has a digital transformation program. Every company, I guarantee it. And when I go in and explore what that digital transformation program is, it's how do we apply digital technology to do what we've always done faster and cheaper. It's scalable efficiency at its best. And the metaphor I use for transformation is moving from the caterpillar to the butterfly. And if you're just making the caterpillar walk faster, that may be very good for the caterpillar, but please do not call that transformation. Until it becomes a butterfly that is unrecognizable from what it was before, we're not talking about transformation. So I see it as an imperative, but I see it also as a huge challenge, but incredible opportunity for those who actually make that journey.
I have to laugh every new phrase you introduce. I mean, not brand new phrase, but thing you say, I'm like, oh, I got to tell that guy to get on the call. Oh, I got to tell that guy to get on the call. Because you're hitting all these key words that I'm like, oh, this is exactly what this person does. They need to hear you. Paul, I brought you on because John was talking about how everything has become so, this is the way you do it. You find a disruption, say a global pandemic, and you scramble. Paul is in the business of logistics and the last mile of manufacturing, getting everything done on shore, and then getting it out, and fulfillment and returns and demos. And go ahead and throw something like trying to get your parts out of Wuhan, and they're sitting somewhere offshore because there's a dock strike, and everyone has got to rethink their supply chain now. Paul, what can you add to that in terms of this conversation that we're having? What can we learn faster?
Well, thank you for bringing it back to the medical device industry. I was getting lost there in macroeconomics and global stuff that you like can't change. It's irrelevant in my opinion, because we as humans we're very limited in who we are, and yeah, there are macro trends, but we have to observe and then move accordingly. And John, your whole idea of rapid learning, and I call it responsiveness to the market and being in sync with your customer. That's the only playing field that impacts everybody on this call. And that's the playing field that we can play in. And we have to be, like you said, John, learn quickly and learn for the sake of responding to our customers' needs, because that's the pitch. Once we make our money by solving other people's problems, we can go live our life like I live in my own life. I recreated it in the pandemic. It's been fantastic for me. So I just want to bring that back to the rest of the group. But yes, in the world, I'm in the world of logistics, and we are going through, God forbid I use the word transformation, but we're changing how we move products because of these macroeconomics, because of the politics, because of the results of the Trump tariffs, because of China doing whatever it's doing. It's no longer the place for cheap or cost-effective production of goods. So now what? And we don't have, we have the answer, but the market hasn't moved entirely in response to that. It takes, I don't know, I'm assessing 5 to 10 years. But we are in this transformation now where I think jobs are coming back to the US, and we're helping that consciously. I did a proposal yesterday for a new client, and we're saying, hey, get out of China, bring, the inbound freight is really costly. So let's change. And what we're doing is creating a space of saying, hey, let's rethink what is the best supply chain configuration so that you can be responsive to that ever demanding customer, right? We coined a term last mile manufacturing. And so we're not saying US based. If your customer's in Dubai, I can manufacture in Dubai. I'll bring the components in. So it goes back to the design stage. Let's do the design elements differently. So you're bringing in components and sub-assemblies, and let me, based on your forecast, open up distribution centers wherever that demanding customer is, because yes, they don't want to wait 3 days, they want it 2 days or overnight, right? And I think if we just, with humility, look at why are we here and what are we doing, and then go to learning and responsiveness, right? Technology is great, right? I mean, digital transformation is a term everybody's using. One of my portfolio companies is in that space, and we're helping companies do that. But, you know, forgive them for they know not what they do, right? But guess what? I almost became a monk when I was 40 years old, so forgive me on that. I almost became a Trappist monk of all things. Wow. But I think there's a degree of humility and compassion I think we've got to allow people to be in, because they can only change at the rate of their level of awareness. There's so much going on in the market. And I just want to congratulate you. The only space or the only strategy to survive is to learn quickly, but to learn in context to you and your customer, because it's too much, right? I mean, you look at any vertical of science and technology, and it's crazy. But your pitch, your playing field, the individual, and I'm speaking to everybody on this group, so I thank you for bringing that piece in. But I think it's really, the focus on learning. But I think it's really important to keep it in context to who are we and what are we here to do.
Thank you, Paul. The reason I brought him in was specifically because of this great disruption, and he's part of the charge to have people learn quickly that you need to have this kind of planning in something. You focus on supply chain. Another member, Jorg, writes, does learning require decentralization?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, to me, when I talk about learning, I'm first of all talking about everyone in the organization, not just the research labs or the innovation centers. Every department, every frontline worker should be learning. And at least based again on the work that I've done, the most effective learning occurs when you come together into small groups. I call them impact groups. They're typically between 3 to 15 people, where they come together with a shared commitment to having increasing impact in a specific area. And they build deep trust-based relationships with each other. And they're both challenging each other. They're constantly challenging, how can we get to better impact, more impact, and learn faster? And they're also supporting each other. When you run into an unexpected failure, come on, let's go. It's okay, we'll make it through this. And so it's a decentralization. Again, I talk about how we organize. It's moving from the top-down hierarchical organization to these small impact groups that are connected more in a network than through the hierarchy. And that's a fundamentally different way of organizing, but I think absolutely critical if we're serious about the form of learning that I'm talking about, which is learning through action. I'll also say that while I certainly understand the need for responsiveness, my increasing view is that what we need to do is to anticipate, not just wait and respond when customer is asking for something, but anticipating what the customer's needs are going to be, not just next week, next month, 10 years from now. What are our customers' needs going to be? I call it, it's an approach that I call zoom out, zoom in. And it comes from some of the most successful technology companies. I've been in Silicon Valley for over 40 years. I've worked with many of the most successful companies. They have a very different approach to strategy. I call it, again, zoom out, zoom in, but they focus on 2 time horizons. One time horizon is 10 to 20 years. And on that horizon, the questions are, what's our relevant market or industry going to look like? Who are our customers going to be 10 to 20 years from now? And then what kind of business opportunity would emerge given those changes that we could be addressing that would make us a fundamentally different company than we are today, 10 to 20 years from now? So that's zoom out, zoom in, 6 to 12 months. And on that horizon, the questions are, what are the 2 or 3 initiatives, no more, 2 or 3 that we could pursue in the next 6 to 12 months that would have the greatest impact in accelerating our movement towards that longer term opportunity that we've identified? And it's very much driven by a learning mindset. We're going to learn through action in the short term about the longer term opportunity that we believe could transform our company. but it's anticipating change. It's not just waiting for change to happen and saying, how can we respond? It's looking ahead and saying, what will this look like? What are the big opportunities? How do we mobilize to address them? And I think that's a very different form of learning than just waiting for something to happen.
Lee, I think you anticipated this direction in the comments that you made. Would you, for the benefit of the group?
Thank you. So John, I'm going to kind of give you an intro. Maybe you'll take it, maybe you won't. Tied to the concept of the edge. And the way I would talk about that from the small groups, big groups, zoom in, zoom out, is in the innovation training that we've seen through our foundation, and which I'm not going to do a commercial on, but
you can tell us the name of the foundation.
Oh, the X Prize Foundation.
Oh, okay.
I'm a trustee, and so from some of the affiliate organizations that are specialists in innovation, one of the things that happens when people get trained in innovation at senior management, it's my observation, it's not a policy, the state policy of the organization, is that people go back into their organizations and they find that the organizations have self-inoculating systems against innovation. And I think it's John smiling because I think that's one of his phrases. What happens is the organizations, people who got there by supply chain, by sales, by quarterly results, they don't need some member of their team coming in telling them how to do everything different than what got them there successfully. So it inoculates the innovation. But if you can create that innovation off on the side, on the edge, and start building it in one of these small teams, not quite sandbox, but that's sort of the visual, then the managers can start watching it or send a concept over to these innovation guys at the edge and bring the edge closer to the center, because that's how the disruption can happen without the self-inoculation. John, did I do that justice to that, or is it, how would you like to deal with it?
Well, it's certainly a great provocation to launch into a whole other set of perspectives. I mean, I think that, I've been involved in transformation efforts with large companies for decades. And the one message I have to leaders about transformation is never, ever underestimate the power of the immune system and the antibodies that exist in every large organization and will mobilize to crush any effort to change, to Lee's point. I think that's the big challenge. And again, it hits on, in the rare occasion that a leader really gets commitment and dedication to transformation, true transformation, they get up in front of their leadership team, they say, oh, hey, we have to change everything. But because we're a large organization, it's going to take a long time. You can't turn around a battleship overnight. It's going to take a lot of money. We're a big organization, can't do this on a shoestring. But trust me, at the end of this, wonderful things are going to happen. And what happens is that excites the immune system, right? A lot of money. Where's that money coming from? Not my pockets. I can't afford to give you any money. I've got too much going on already in my department. And then, a long time, I got quarterly performance targets to meet, and they're very challenging. I can't be distracted. Get away. And, they'll smile and nod in the leadership meeting and say, yes, we need to change. And then they go into the privacy of their offices and conspire to figure out how they're going to resist the change, undermine the change. So to Lee's point, I've become a strong proponent of what I call scaling the edge as the way to drive transformation. Rather than going top down, big bang, and trying to change everything in the core of the business, it's find an edge that today has relatively modest revenue, profits, resources. But if you understand the long-term forces that are driving change, that edge could actually become the new core of your business. It's not just a growth initiative or a diversification initiative. This will be the new core of your business. And focus on scaling that edge as rapidly as possible until it becomes the new core. And over time, with the power of pull, you will draw more and more of the people and resources from the core into this edge as it scales. But I think that that's a very different approach to transformation. And again, I'm a bit of a contrarian on many levels, but one contrarian point is that many companies I know say, oh, we have a lot of edge initiatives. We've got 25 edge initiatives, to Lee's point, sandboxes, places where people can play. I believe the more edge initiatives you have, the more likely you are to fail. that the ones who will be the most successful are those who have one edge initiative and are totally committed to scaling that edge until it becomes the new core. So again, challenging. I don't want to suggest it's easy, but I do believe that it's really a key to driving change and transformation.
And Joe, I'd like to add there into the digital health category. It's that if we assume that the existing system is broken in many ways, and if we look at how new devices are emerging at a rate of speed to do more things in predictive analytics that don't yet have billing codes or are not, there's no large national buyer to incorporate these new devices. This is the one industry that will disrupt the existing status quo only from the edge. So each of us can be edge specialists, and the corporations working with us not to buy our given product, but for us to basically play a role in developing an edge strategy to enhancing healthcare, both from predictive analytics to digital therapeutics to other areas of efficiency. Because as there's more and more people and more need for health, even with the pandemic, I haven't seen many new medical schools or nursing schools created over the last 3 years, even when there was a fair amount of demand for that. So I just think that digital will be is the new edge of the entire healthcare industry.
It also can be quite challenging to find the funding for these edge initiatives, especially for the younger companies. It's one of the reasons I brought my friend Eddie on, but the real reason I brought Eddie on is because he and I go back 30 years. We went to Wharton Business School together, and I'm bringing him on because of the skit with Rachel and Adam come sing about cash. And Rachel comes in and she's a consultant, and she paraphrases what like the janitor said like 30 minutes earlier. And the guy, the CEO says, "We know that already. You know what?" And he says, oh, just send me the bill. And so she walks off. And, the joke there is that, and I find this in my own, what you're saying is so relevant and so important. And yet somebody wrote me in the comments, this is so abstract. Like, what do I do? Like, you're talking about such big, momentous changes. I'm trying to get through the day-to-day. So how, I have to wonder, as a former McKinsey consultant, and you've gone in and you've spoken to captains of industry, you've talked about the edge. How many of them have succeeded? How many of them have been able to take these concepts and make them work, as opposed to this inoculation from inside and, like that's coming out of my area and such? I'm acutely interested in that, John.
Yeah, again, I don't believe it's, there are not yet a lot of great examples of success. This is very challenging, but there are some examples. And so I think, interesting illustration is Corning Glass, a glass company, right? And it started many decades ago in consumer products, cooking glass.
I'm sorry, you broke up there. What's your example?
Corning Glass.
Yes. Okay.
And they started decades ago with kitchen appliances, kitchen, glass things for the kitchen. Over time, they saw the emergence of glass for computer screens and for phone devices, and they made a fundamental transition into that. And then they saw now I'm blanking on the networks of glass, fiber, and they become a leader in that. And in each case, they started with an edge. The core of their business was still there. And, in some cases it's still there, but it's just a fringe thing. The core has fundamentally shifted over time. And they did it by scaling the edge.
Another good example of that is W.L. Gore, the company that makes Gore-Tex. Yeah. One of their philosophies is that they never let a business unit get to be more than 120 people. And, this is on that scale of sort of those scales of teams going down to things like football teams or teams of miners. You get to a certain amount, or a platoon, you get to a certain number of people, you can no longer care about what the other people in your organization are doing. And so they'll take like Gore-Tex as a material, but then when it becomes something which more and more people are dealing with, keep bringing it back to medical devices, the material for putting into stent graft material, well, that then becomes a medical application. So we're going to create that unit. But then if the medical application for coronary gets too big, we're going to subdivide that into other areas and figure out what those things are so that each one can continue to grow. The whole organization still has the fundamentals. But anyway, you see it's similar to the Corning example.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Okay.
So
there are some examples, but
yeah,
widespread,
but
sure.
with that example, I can give you loads of others because I used to run a company that was trying to develop bacteriophage as opposed to antibiotics. And you go to an organization like GSK, and your problem is that you've got people who dedicated their entire lives, 30 plus years, to developing the next antibiotic. So you're having to find those individuals for whom making that sort of fundamental shift in the way a whole organization is focused, rarer than hen's teeth.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Lee, you just wrote a comment I don't follow.
Oh, Eddie was talking about phage technology, and look, this is the pathway to antibiotic resistance. And I was saying that I love Stephanie Strathy and everything that's been going on at IPATH, and which is a UCSD institute focused on phages, gram-positive phages. And Gladskin and Mikrios are doing gram-negative phages. I think it's the most important medical biotech industry that we can see.
I'd love to have an offline conversation with you because I am bored for the UK and the US because I live in the UK. It was 10, 15 years ago that I was sitting down with a guy in New York and I explained, and this guy actually ran the American Institute for Infectious Diseases. And I said, look, if you think about it, although we've been doing antibiotics for 70 years, 80 years, I said, you break that down into the lifespan of a bacterium and how long they've been getting exposed to antibiotics, it works out to something like 45 million human lifetime equivalents. We will not look like we do today, 45 million years from now. And he had never thought about it in that sort of evolutionary mindset. And so antibiotics are a losing game. And you're absolutely right. I think you need to figure out how to harness something like bacteriophage, which can evolve with the disease. Anyway.
Eddie, I look forward to talking to you offline. I was just complimenting you for mentioning bacteriophages. They're biological devices, Joe. They're not mechanical devices.
Yeah.
Nikki's with you, Eddie. John, what I really hope to do, and perhaps this is common among folks who engage you and want to bring your insights to their organizations. I've got a few dozen people on the call. We've had a robust conversation, mind expanding. I'm thinking about these things, and I'm thinking there's got to be at least half of them thinking that was really interesting. They're going to go off the call and they're going to do what they were doing. Is there any kind of like starter kit? Is there some kind of, if you've learned nothing from this call, please go and blank, blank, and blank. Are there things that you can, concrete things that we can go do? Start by something. Can you give us anything that we can put into practice?
Yeah, I mean, it really depends on where you are in the organization. I think that one thing that I urge everyone to do wherever they are is, and I think it was reflected in a comment that we had about, I'm just so consumed with what I need to do today, is we are all consumed by the short term. And I will say, let me just go into a tangent for a second, but my new book is called The Journey Beyond Fear. And I believe that increasingly the challenge we face is that we are driven by fear in a world of mounting performance pressure. And one of the consequences is we just focus on the moment, on today, because that's all we can do. It's too challenging. I can't be distracted. And
too many contingencies, way out of, let me at least get this thing done.
Right, exactly. And I think that one of the things we all need to do is look inside and say, are we being driven by fear or excitement? And again, in my experience, more and more of us are being driven by fear. And just coming to that realization that it is fear that's driving our choices and actions, and that fear, while understandable, is very limiting. Because again, it just focuses us on the moment. We lose trust in others. We become very risk averse. There are all kinds of consequences of fear. So recognizing that fear is driving us, and then stepping back and saying, is there an opportunity out there that really would be exciting to pursue, that could start to refocus me in terms of where I'm spending my time and actions, and how can I get others to help? It's drawing in others to do this with you. Again, I go back to the small group. My strong advice to people is don't try to do this just on your own. Find a small group that shares that kind of commitment to something new and different, and work with them together and focus on action and impact, and be learning through that process. But the faster you can get to impact results that matter, the more you'll overcome the fear, the more excited you'll become about the opportunity that's out there, and the more you'll draw other people in to join you, because you're demonstrating, wow, you were able to do that. Let's see if I can participate. So that's certainly one piece of advice at a very individual level, is just looking inside and working to overcome the fear.
I can personally relate. I've been invited to work on a big idea in the medical device space, but this guy is still raising capital, and he's like, work with me. I'll give you options 2 years from now, if it's at this price or that. And I'm like, I'd love to, man, but I just, like lots of people, my income took a hit with COVID these last 2 years. I need money now. That's my fear, So yeah, I'm in on the theory of it, but we have things right now. I'm going to go back to the question I asked, though. You mentioned fear and how, when we're motivated by it, it can be limiting. Are there some things that we can look at objectively as, you said it's a function of where you are and what company you're at? Common things that we can do to accelerate learning, for example? Because you said, oh, I say learning, executives' eyes say, oh, you mean training programs. You're like, no, not training programs. What are they then? What are these steps that the organization can begin to make together?
Yeah, and again, I think it varies depending on where you are. If you're a leader of some type in an organization, one of my strong recommendations is to shift. The mark of a strong leader today is the one who has the answer to every question. No matter what question, you can count on the leader to have an answer. By the way, if they don't have an answer, maybe it's time to get rid of them and find somebody who does.
Or he knows someone who knows the answer.
Yeah, right. I believe the most powerful leaders in the future are going to be those who have the most inspiring questions, and who will freely admit they don't have an answer and ask for help. So if we're trying to promote learning in the kind that I'm talking about, if you have a leader who's saying, here's a question, I don't know what the answer is, but if we could come up with an answer, we accomplish amazing things. Can you help me? It starts to send a message throughout the whole organization that questions are not only okay, they're necessary. And how do we come together and try to do this? And so I think it, again, starts to shift the whole culture of the organization towards a learning culture of really trying to accomplish things that have never been done before.
Interestingly, and I'm sure you saw it pop up as I did, my friend Luke asks, what is your definition of learning? I just know learning, and I just accepted what you were saying. Do you have a definition that's different than what we typically think of as learning?
Well, again, I think we typically think of learning as, taking courses. I'll just say, again, a bit of an aside, but again, buzzwords in the business world, one of the buzzwords today is lifelong learning. We all have to be lifelong learners. Mm-hmm. I've never once heard a leader express what's the motivation for lifelong learning. That takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of risk. Why would people do lifelong learning? And when I press the leader on it, the answer I get is, oh, if they don't do lifelong learning, they're going to lose their jobs. So they got to learn. it's playing to fear. Fear can be a bit of a motivator for learning, but it's not the most powerful motivator for learning. I believe those who are really excited about opportunities that have not yet been achieved are those who are really going to learn the fastest, and they're going to learn a lot faster than those who are just driven by fear to try to keep their job. So how can we motivate people with excitement about an opportunity out there that hasn't been achieved? And again, back to the question of learning, definition of learning, it can take many different forms, but the learning I'm talking about is learning how to have more and more impact that is meaningful to people. Whatever context you're in, how can you have more and more impact that's meaningful to people? And that pushes the boundary of value that you're delivering to people, whether it's customers, other people in your company, wherever. But I think, again, everybody in the organization is going to have to embrace that form of learning. I talk about janitors in a building. I think the janitors are going to have to be learning constantly how to have more and more impact, how to make the facilities more and more helpful and valuable to the people that are in them. So anyway, just as an example, but I think it's all about impact and value, again, in a world that's more demanding, where customers and others are expecting more, wanting more. How do we find ways to deliver more? And that's value, not just faster and cheaper.
I'm a little uncomfortable with my next question because it's like the questions I asked you before, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm just not hearing you properly or not processing it right. I still feel as though the conversation is abstract enough that I don't know what to do when I get off the phone. I don't know what to do differently. And I was wondering if there's something you can point me to, where to start on this. We've talked about, asking the right questions and inspiring the organization. Yes. But, that's a lot of people to move in one direction,
No, you can do it. You can do it in your small group, in the people in your department and small department. Ask an important question. Ask an inspiring question that will motivate you. You can do that tomorrow. You can do that later today. I'm sure if you ask yourself, there are a lot of questions that you've never even asked, much less been able to answer. Why not do that?
Okay, so start with intriguing questions to get people thinking. Are there other perhaps steps that come to mind that could be good places to start? Getting your book will help, because I'm sure these are in depth, and we'll be able to, but I'm trying to glean in these closing 2 minutes if there's something that I can impart for these folks that they can go do.
Yeah, well, again, it varies a lot by context, but I think one key thing that I talk about a lot with executives I deal with is metrics for impact. What is the value? How would we measure progress? And again, it's moving from faster, cheaper to value delivered. What are the metrics of the value that you're delivering? And how can you start to focus on that in real time, get real-time feedback mechanisms to get that performance, that value, so you can see what the consequences are of your actions today, and tomorrow perhaps improve on it so that you can get even more impact and value. But I think metrics become key in this whole notion of real-time feedback to help you learn faster what's achieving impact and what's not achieving impact.
I am extremely grateful for your time today, and to our mutual friend Lee Stein for this introduction. Ironically, next week's conversation is about fear. Next week, we're going to talk about how to avoid liability lawsuits and satisfy the FDA as well. And Larry Stevens will be our guest. John Hagel, my profound thanks on behalf of the Medical Devices Group. Thank you for joining us today.
No, and I'm constantly trying to learn. So I would encourage anybody who's been listening who has more questions, reach out to me. I have my website, johnhagel.com, and I'm active on social media and would welcome the questions, because that's how I'm going to learn. Thank you.
For now. Thank you, John. Have a good week, everyone. Bye for now.